or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Dzień dobry. This is Joanne Janicki, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 25th, 2026 issue of the Am-Pol Eagle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I hope everyone is well. I thought I saw a recipe as I scrolled through quickly to see what was in this week's issue. But anyway, trying to have something that you can keep track of phone numbers as needed, websites as needed, email addresses as needed is always helpful. But let's just jump right into the front page. There are quite a few photographs. And the first article is about Blue Army and the volunteers who took a pilgrimage to Niagara-on-the-Lake. And the photographs are quite colorful because many of the people in the photographs are carrying large floral displays in red and white. There is a photograph of Zosia Soya, Canadian Polish Congress Niagara Division President and pilgrimage organizer. Then we have, I believe, some kind of scouts. Young Oliver Lebanovich of Charna Voda Scouts in Oakville, Ontario, said he was honored to be chosen to lay the scouting wreath with Stan Rietmeyer of the Polish Scouting Association. Then there is a photograph of, I guess you would call it a pergola or a kiosk, beautifully designed, surrounded by all those flowers. And it's a photograph, and the caption reads, "Wreaths through the rain behind the graves in St. Vincent de Paul Cemetery." Then we have a photograph of Steve Floor of the Polish American Congress National Secretary, and he is in his Blue Army uniform. Quite impressive. Lots of medals on the man's chest. He wears that uniform well. So let's get the background on all of these beautiful photos. The annual pilgrimage to Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, Canada, was held June 14th, 2026. It is the commemoration to honor the Canadian and American Polish immigrants who volunteered to join General Józef Haller's Blue Army in World War I to fight for Poland's independence that would be won in 1918. The current Fort George at Niagara-on-the-Lake is where the recruits trained. The undesirable weather forecast forced Zosia Soya, president of the Polish-Canadian Congress Niagara Division, to coordinate last-minute alternative plans for the event. Only lead dignitaries and representatives of the various groups were present at the cemetery to lay the wreaths at the gravesite in the Niagara-on-the-Lake. Buried there are some of the volunteer soldiers who died of the Spanish influenza pandemic while at camp and never made it to Europe. The annual march to the cemetery and the parade to the clock tower were canceled as the wreath-laying ceremony was just about complete and the raindrops and wind rapidly turned into a downpour. Mass was moved from Niagara-on-the-Lake to St. Catharines, about 22 miles away. Once the wreath layers joined their respective groups, the Remembrance Mass began at Our Lady of Perpetual Help Parish. At Mass, honor and glory to the heroes was the response during special offerings presented by a Polish senior scout. Final blessings were welcomed in the full church, and a soulful God Thou Hast Poland was sung. Most of the congregation proceeded in the constant rain to the Canadian Polish Society near the church. At the reception, Polish, Canadian, and American national anthems were sung, dedication speeches and callouts were shared. The Polish ambassador to Canada, Polish representatives of the military attaché, ranking Polish and Canadian councils, honored guests, veteran organizations, some of the scouts, and many supporters were in attendance. A Royal Canadian Drum Corps unit performed. Organizers are planning for the 110th anniversary of Niagara-on-the-Lake Camp Kosciuszko in 2027 and wishing for a dry pilgrimage. Makes perfect sense. I'm going to jump to Polish news bites because Poland's president visited the United States. There is a photograph. This is taken in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and President Nawrocki met with Republican Majority Leader John Thune, and they're shaking hands in the photograph, and attending the discussions were Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Committee on Armed Services, and Jim Risch, chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Poland's president, Karol Nawrocki, attended a banquet at the White House June 14, 2026, at the invitation of United States President Donald Trump, who was celebrating his birthday, and the UFC Freedom 250 Gala that day. This year marks the 250th anniversary of the signing of the United States Declaration of Independence. He also met with representatives of the Polish-American community traveling in Florida. During a briefing, Marcin Przydacz, head of the International Policy Bureau, remarked that President Nawrocki was the only head of state to attend the reception hosted by President Trump. He added that the event brought together prominent American politicians and business representatives. The Polish leader was accompanied by Jan Błachowicz, a Polish athlete and former UFC light heavyweight world champion. The minister emphasized that during the meeting, Presidents Nawrocki and Trump primarily discussed Polish-American relations, including security policy, the presence of American troops, and continued arms policy. Moreover, their discussions also focused on the upcoming NATO summit in Ankara. During the event, the Polish leader also spoke with United States Presidents J.D. Vance and other representatives of the United States administration. Journalists also wished to know whether Donald Trump's recent declaration regarding buildup of the presence of Allied troops in Poland had been addressed. In his reaction to the question on the subject, Minister Marcin Przydacz stated, quote, "The White House is fully prepared and open to increasing the presence. Decisions about a permanent presence will also be made at the White House level, but only after the Pentagon has carried out the necessary strategic and planning work." End quote. Quote, "The President spoke with the President of the United States, but also with the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, about energy and gas cooperation," said Marcin Przydacz. He pointed out that late April this year, the U.S. Secretary of Energy had participated in the Three Seas Initiative Summit in Dubrovnik, where the issue of intensifying energy cooperation with the United States had been raised in order to make our region independent from Russian gas supplies to the greatest extent possible. President Nawrocki also met with Michael Waltz, the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations. While at the Capitol, he also met with Republican Majority Leader John Thune. Attending the discussions were Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Committee on Armed Services, and Jim Risch, chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Quote, "The discussion focused primarily on security policy and the challenges we are facing in the context of the upcoming NATO summit," said Minister Marcin Przydacz, adding that Russian policy was also raised. He noted that President Nawrocki is a strong advocate for increasing sanctions imposed on Russia. According to the according to the BPM head, continued arming of Ukraine and imposing further sanctions could curb Russia's aggressive policies. Quote, in short, without funding, Vladimir Putin will not be able to continue the war, he pointed out. At the end of his visit, President Nawrocki traveled to Florida, where he met with representatives of the Polish-American community at the Polish Center of John Paul II in Clearwater on June 16th. Let me find my next article here. Radio show celebrates Polish summer. There is a photograph of a radio show guest, and as I'm glancing here, it appears to be Sophie Hodorowicz-Nab. We've heard her name many times in reading the Am-Pol Eagle. Let's see what this is about. The newest episode of the Polish-American program features an interview with Polish traditions expert Sophie Hodorowicz-Nab about customs associated with the beginning of summer in Polish tradition. The episode also includes Polish music and bits about Polish history and can be heard anytime at polishprogram.com. The Polish-American program is hosted by Andrzej Gołębiowski, who is also organizing a tour of Poland in September of this year. Details of the tour can be obtained by email at andy@polishprogram.com. The radio show can also be heard on Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on WEBR AM 1440. There is a healing music service upcoming. Holy Trinity Church, 3319 Lakeshore Road in Woodlawn, will host a healing music service with anointing of the sick at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, July 7th at the church. Light refreshments will be served afterwards. All are welcome. For more information, we've got a website, www.Holy Trinity in Woodlawn, no spaces, holytrinityin.woodlawn.org. Senior housing open houses planned. 2 HUD-subsidized senior housing communities in Buffalo are currently accepting applications for persons 62 years of age or older, with several immediate openings at this time. Low-income housing residents pay 30% of their annual income for rent. The events are at Piotr Stadnicki Gardens on Wednesday, July 8th from 11 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. That's at 100 Beck Street in Buffalo. I've got a phone number for more information, 716-239-4177. Again, 716-239-4177. Also, Riverview Manor, Tuesday, July 7th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's at 8 Hurdle Avenue in Buffalo, New York. A different phone number, 716-235-2392. Again, 716-235-2392. I'm going to squeak in our first break just a minute or two early, because then I'm going to jump to Polonia's calendar, which looks like it's got lots of information for you. So, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Am-Pol Eagle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So, as promised, Polonia's calendar. We have Sunday, June 28th, Celebration of Life, a fundraiser in memory of Father Czesław Krysa, It's a 10 a.m. Mass at St. Casimir's Church, 160 Cable Street in Buffalo, New York. And that's followed by a fundraiser at Potts Banquet Hall in Cheektowaga. $20, cash only, lunch, music, raffles, and more. Potts Banquet Hall, Clinton and Rossler. I know it by heart, even though it's not listed here. So then we have the Polish American Arts Festival, July 24th, 25th, and 26th at Cheektowaga Town Park. Polish food and beverage, music, crafts, dance groups, exhibits, lectures, demonstrations, and more, free admission. I'm sure we will have more details as we get closer to the event, but that's one of the biggest events for Polonia in the Western New York area. We have Tuesday, August 4th, Buffalo Bison's Polish Festival Night. There's a pregame club-level party, starts at 5:30 in the evening with live music, great Polish food, specials, and more. The Bison's Leadership Award presentation to Tom and Paula Golemowski of Happy Swallow. Polish American of the Year Award presentation to Mary Lou Vidobek. And post-game fireworks. Buffalo Bisons have great fireworks. Saturday, August 8th, Derek Kaczorowski Memorial College Scholarship Fundraiser. It's at Depew Polish Falcons at 6:30 in the evening. For tickets or information, contact Jim Kaczorowski. I've got email and phone number. You've got jekaz@yahoo.com or 716-864-4642. Again, 716-864-4642. On Sunday, August 23rd, all-Polish composer concert by the Amherst Chamber Orchestra at St. Stanislaus Church, 389 Peckham Street in Buffalo at 2:30 in the afternoon. Free will offering. Garden party following the concert at the former convent on Wilson Street entrance. For garden party tickets and reservations, I've got a phone number, 716-876-8108, extension 133. I'll do it again, 716-876-8108, extension 133. Thursday, September 10th, Farewell to Summer fundraiser, Clocks Grove and Banquet Hall. That's in West Seneca, New York, and let's hope we get some more details on that one. Let's see, Sunday, September 26th, St. Adalbert's Basilica, 140th anniversary dinner at Keebsack's Banquet in Sloan, New York, and they promise more information to follow, so we'll be patient on that. Well, lots of activities for you to put on your calendar and try to work in your social ongoings. How's that? There's always something. So many celebrations. I'm going to do this week in the history of Buffalo's Polonia next. And this is a list of events that occurred during the week of June 25th to July 1st. On July 1st, 1917, the Polish Union of America is incorporated under New York law. Although informally established in 1890, the PUA chose to incorporate in order to achieve compliance with requirements for operations as a fraternal benefit society. For many years, the Polish Union maintained its headquarters at 761 Fillmore Avenue in Buffalo, New York. We have June 28th, 1925. The body of Reverend Hyacinth Fudzinski lies in state at Corpus Christi Church in Buffalo. Father Fudzinski was the church's founding pastor and a leader of the Franciscan order. Also on June 28, 1925, performing under the stage name of Gilda Gray, Mariana Michalska begins a week-long engagement at the Shays Hippodrome Theater. One of the most popular dancers of the 1920s, Michalska was reputed to be the highest-paid performer on the American stage. On July 1st, 1936, a container of earth leaves western New York for shipment to Krakow for inclusion in Pilsudski's mound, which was then under construction as a memorial to the late Polish leader Józef Pilsudski. And finally, June 29th, 1964, Reverend Stanislaus Bżana becomes the first bishop of Polish descent to serve in the Catholic Diocese of Buffalo. And I have, at least the name, memories of Reverend Bżana, or Bishop Bżana, I guess that would be. So let's see what else we have here. Oh my, this is going to take us to Tom Tadapachki's Polonia press box. And who's looking at me in the picture? Again, our favorite local nemesis, Rob Gronkowski. It's a U.S. Navy photo by Mass Communications Specialist, Second Class, Sarah M. Thielen. There are some young women in the photograph that are cut off. I can't, one has a Navy headband on. Well, let's see if we can find out more. But Gronk is smiling from ear to ear. Let's see what Tom has to say about our nemesis. I'm anxious to tell you about my recent trip to Poland, but there's been a lot of sports news I need to get to. I'll tell you about Poland next week. First of all, the 2026 class of the Polish American Sports Hall of Fame was inducted. Rob Gronkowski, a four-time Super Bowl winning tight end, and hockey great David Legwand, outstanding Green Bay Packer offensive tackle Brian Bulaga, and the late UCL basketball player All-American Dave Myers. Gronkowski helped the banquet in Troy, Michigan draw a record turnout of over 500 attendees. The Western New York native talked out his family's involvement in sports, his trip to Poland, and much more. I'll provide more details about the event in a future column. We're switching to baseball. Hot pitchers. In baseball, Jacob Misharovsky continued to amaze. The 24-year-old Milwaukee Brewer is not only the fastest starting pitcher in the game, he reached 104.5 miles per hour. Over the last month, he's dominated batters unlike any pitcher in the last century. Misharovsky has allowed just one earned run over his last 8 starts. Right now, he's 8-3 with a 1.45 ERA. Even the legendary fastballer Nolan Ryan has taken notice. Quote, "It's a gift that he has, and it's special," Ryan said. He continued, "No doubt about it, because you just don't see many arms like it," end quote. He's not as spectacular as Miz, but the LA Dodgers' Justin Wróblewski is enjoying a great year as well. He's 8-2 with a 2.7 ERA. You could see him join Miz at the All-Star game. Colorado Rockies outfielder Mickey Moniak seemed to be heading for the All-Stars game until he was sidelined by a right ankle tendonitis. The former number 1 overall draft pick is batting .280 with 12 homers and 28 RBIs in 43 games for Colorado this season, and is expected to return to the lineup shortly. Now we're going to switch to basketball, and there are 2 photographs here. We have a photograph of Jeremy Sohan, a photo by Frenchie in Portland, and Jeremy is from the Spurs. Then we also have a photograph, and I guess eventually this article is going to switch to tennis because she's holding a tennis racket. Maya Shvalinska, and this photo is by Nuta Lucian from Cluj-Napoca, Romania. Let's start with basketballs. When the NBA Finals began, one thing was certain. Jeremy Sohan was going to get a ring. That's because he began the 2025-26 season with the San Antonio Spurs, where he played 28 games, averaging 4.1 points per game in 12.8 minutes. But he didn't figure into the Spurs' future plans, so in February he reached a mutual agreement with the team to be waived. Several teams pursued him, but he signed with the Knicks, who needed signed depth for their playoff run. This means that since he was part of both the Spurs and the Knicks in 2025-26, when New York and San Antonio met in the finals, he would receive a ring regardless of who won. Of course, the Knicks won, but New York didn't suffer many injuries, so Sohan's playing time was limited on the team's run to the title. However, he helped by providing valuable intel on his former team and by agitating his former teammates from the bench. Over to tennis. What a run. Although she didn't win the final, Maya Shvalinska's run at the French Open was nothing short of amazing. She lost to 19-year-old number 8 seed Mira Andreeva in the final, 6-3, 6-2, but made the run of her pro career. Ranked 114th, Shvalinska was the second qualifier in the Open era to reach the singles final in a major, and the first to do so at Roland Garros. She claimed 6 main draw wins en route to the final, as many as in her entire career prior to the event. She had never won more than 2 tour-level matches in a single season. Maya also became the third Polish woman in the Open era to reach a Grand Slam singles final, joining Agnieszka Radwanska and Iga Świątek. Shvalinska was regarded as one of Poland's brightest junior talents. Early in her life, Maya and friend Świątek were runners-up in the Australian Open 2017 girls doubles and won the European junior doubles titles. The duo helped Poland capture the Junior Fed Cup crown in 2016. However, while Inga rose to stardom, Shvalinska had to deal with injuries, including knee surgery, as well as a period of depression. Świątek is a 4-time champion of the French Open and reached the semifinals 5 out of 6 times between 2020 and 2025. That's why Roland Garros has been nicknamed Poland Garros over the past few years. However, Świątek got knocked out of the 4th round this year, and another Polish woman got her chance to shine. Okay, so much for sports. Good stuff. I mentioned earlier that there might be a recipe because the title is chocolate chip cookie. And I'm looking at the continuation from page 4. But when I go to page 4, I don't see the cookie recipe. So I don't know what the glitch is. I apologize. If there's a recipe, I don't know where it is. And perhaps they'll repeat it at another time. So let's move on. Break first. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Am-Pol Eagle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I'm going to do something I don't know that I've ever done before, but I am going to work backwards. I'm now on page 12 of the Am-Pol Eagle. And I'm doing this because the gardening feature is usually the last feature on the back page. And I often give it short shrift, not intentionally, but just because I'm running out of time. So it's going to get all the time it deserves. And Polonia's Gardens is about the shade garden this week. And Renia Senko-Hanchak, our gardener journalist, has got a lovely article here with some gorgeous, gorgeous shade garden photographs. There is a picture of Dr. Marilyn Barker sitting in the garden. She's got her sun hat on. Hope she's got her sunscreen on because she's sitting in full sun, even though it's about the shade garden. Then we go to the shade garden pictures. And beautiful hostas and impatiens. And I do notice, and I've done this myself, there's a lovely hosta that's growing in a cement urn. And if you have any deer in your area, you know that the deer just love to eat the hostas. So someone has put an upside-down wire basket over the hosta to protect it. It will continue to grow, and with any luck, the deer won't figure out how to knock off the basket and eat the hostas. More hosta photographs, multi-hued, growing beneath some kind of tree or large shrub. Another very large, gorgeous hosta in, it's either a cement urn or an iron urn. And then a photograph of ivy and I think begonias. And when you look carefully, and I just noticed this, there is and it's small, it's a lovely little fairy statue. And it is little, and it's nestled in the ivy and looks like she's holding maybe a leaf that is her holding birdseed. So maybe if you feed the critters intentionally, they won't eat your plants and flowers. Okay, let's see what Renia Senko-Hanchak has to say. With warm summer days in the forecast, I can't think of anything more welcoming than a cool green spot in a garden with dappled light filtering down through a tree. A shade garden is made up of plants selected for their colorful leaves and texture. Sunlight is the key to growth and flower production, so when shaded, slower growth occurs and less flowering. The degree of shade varies. Full shade is considered 2 hours or less of sun per day. Partial shade is 4 to 6 hours daily, and dappled shade areas have light filtering through trees for most of the day. This is important when selecting the plants for this low light area. Once established, these shaded gardens are generally low maintenance, but it is important to note that large trees with surface roots compete for water. Check for dryness. When establishing a shade garden, work plenty of rich compost into the soil to improve water retention and provide nutrients. Mulch conserves moisture and suppresses weeds. Commonly found plants for the shade garden include hellebores, spring blooming perennials like a columbine, bleeding hearts, and violets that flower before the overhead trees leaf out, hostas and ferns. Shade-loving plants also include wax begonias, coleus, impatiens, and forget-me-nots. I first met Dr. Marilyn Barker when she showed me her prize daylilies. I couldn't help notice that her garden also contained areas heavily shaded by large old trees. This tranquil spot was filled with beautiful shade plants, including Rex begonia and hostas. She accents the garden with potted plants and interesting figures that she collects at estate and garage sales. Her husband claims their basement looks like an archaeological dig. Thank you, Marilyn, for a second peek into your lovely garden. I'm going to give you an update from the last Polonia's Gardens that I read. We had the Juneteenth holiday and a power outage, so I haven't read the Am-Pol Eagle in a few weeks. But when I did, it was about herbs. And I may have mentioned that I was looking for, now I can't remember what I was looking for. Oh, the senior moments. Tarragon. I was looking for tarragon, and I had been to many garden centers, and nobody had it. And you can't start it from seed. Well, I'm sure somebody can because it grows, but it's very, very difficult, and you have to use special conditions that I'm just not equipped for. So I read about Bill Weber's, it was mentioned in the article, and 106 different herbs. And when I left the studio that day, I drove around the corner, literally, and went straight to Bill Weber's down Old French Road. And I had never been there before. I'd always stopped early on in that Old French Road. But Bill Weber's is quite the place. And all the herbs, of course, they had tarragon. So I bought 3 little plants, and one of them is for my sister, and one of them is for my little herb garden, and one is going to the Channel 2 gardener, Jackie Albarella, who's a good friend of mine, and she has an herb garden as well. Okay, enough. Let's see what else we have here. There is an article about the Felician sisters. And if you've ever listened to my reading of the Am-Pol Eagle, you know how fond I am of the Felicians. My aunt, sister Augustiane, was a Felician, and the Felicians that we had at St. Barbara's in Lackawanna. So let's see what this is about. Advocacy, justice, and peace from displacement to belonging. This is reprinted with permission from the spring 2026 Felician, the magazine of the Felician Sisters of North America. There is a black and white photograph of a well-dressed couple. The gentleman is in a suit and the woman is in a lovely dress. And one is pushing a baby carriage with the baby in it, sitting up, so maybe 7, 8 months old. And the gentleman is pushing more of a stroller, and cute little baby in it with a hat on, a little like a little tam hat, and hard to tell, maybe overalls. Let's see what this is about. Sister Mary Renee Kurchaba's American journey serves as both a history lesson and a profound teaching moment. Though Isabel Irene Kurchaba didn't know it at the time, it was a hugely pivotal day in her 11-month-old life. The date, late summer 1950. After several years in Polish refugee camp number 11 in the British zone of post-war Germany, in the tiny town of Wattenstedt-Salzgitter, Isabel's parents, a brother and she, had just boarded a train that was headed to the coast. A photographer captured the moment. I think that's our photograph. The expressions on Isabel's parents' faces seem, well, a lot of things. Anxious, hopeful, steadfast, maybe a little befuddled. At the coast, a ship would take the Kerchaba family to their new life in America. It would be a second chance made possible by the Polish-American Refugee Services and by the strength and courage of Isabel's parents. That little girl grew up to be Sister Mary Renee Kerchaba, now the local minister of Our Lady of Hope Convent in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, the provincial house. In addition to serving as local minister, Sister Renee wears many hats in the Felician community. She serves on the community's formation team, works with sisters in temporary profession as temporary profess director, and contributes her leadership on the board and real estate committee for St. Felix Center in Toronto, Ontario. Her journey involved many twists and turns, but it's been guided by her steadfast service to God and God's people and her love for the Felician sisters. To help celebrate the country's 250th anniversary, it is especially fitting to tell Sister Renee's story. That story starts with her parents. Sister Renee remembers her mom as a loving mother, a hard worker, and a proud American. Also, very brave. Quote, "My mother's family, last name Zaremba, got into serious trouble near the end of Second World War because they sheltered Jews on their farm," says Sister Renee. She continued, "One day, a truck driven by German soldiers came along and snatched up the whole family and sent them to a labor camp." End quote. When the war ended, Stefania and her family were placed in Polish refugee camp number 11. After several years at the camp, the family decided to return to Poland, minus Stefania. Quote, "By then she had met and married my father and had 2 children, my brother Alex and me," says Sister Renee. She'd made the decision to emigrate rather than return home to Poland. She was quite young at the time with 2 little kids. That was a courageous thing to do, a huge step into the unknown for her, end quote. When the family settled into their refugee sponsor family in Calverton, a rural community on Long Island, New York, Stefania did housework, cooking, cleaning, and laundry for her hosts. After moving to Buffalo, New York, and learning English from friends in the neighborhood, as well as school, Sister Renee remembers helping her mother with English translations during various appointments. Quote, "She was so proud of her adopted country," remembers Sister Renee. "I recall her saying to one of her friends in Buffalo that it was okay to listen to the local Polish station on the radio, but that we needed to listen to the American news too. She said, 'This is our country now,'" end quote. Isabel and her mother remained close throughout her teen years, which made for a bit of a challenge when Isabel announced to her parents that she was joining the Felician Order. Quote, "It's actually funny to think about it now, though certainly not at the time, but it was a scene at my acceptance ceremony," says Sister Renee. "I remember looking out of the corner of my eye at my parents in their seats. My father was beaming, my mother was weeping," end quote. Add Sister Renee, "She came around to my calling and supported me in it. But it was hard for her at first. I was very young and her only daughter." Sister Renee's father, Adam, was hardworking, pious, well-educated, and determined to build a better life for his family. After their years in the refugee camp in Germany, during which he'd wedded Stefania and had Alex and Isabel, Adam had no intention of returning to communist Poland. Quote, "My father wrote in his journal that when we arrived in New York Harbor on September 5th, 1950, one of the first things he saw was the Statue of Liberty. I wasn't quite a year old, so I have no memory of that moment. I can't imagine how that must have felt," end quote. The way the refugee program worked was that you were assigned to a sponsor family before your journey was over. You then lived with them and worked until you paid off the cost of your voyage to the United States, end quote. After working in the fields for their host family on Long Island, the Kerchabas moved to Buffalo, where Stefania and Adam raised their children, and then later in life moved to Cheektowaga, New York. Once the family settled in the Polish section of East Buffalo, Adam got work at the Bison Cheese Company and then the New York Central Railroad. Stefania worked for a bakery at the Broadway Market and later as a seamstress at Hickey Freeman Company. Quote, "My father had been a teacher in Poland before the war, and he co-founded a Polish language school in East Buffalo that met on Saturdays," says Sister Renee. We learned the Polish language, history, and Polish songs and dances. I remember being surrounded by a lot of love and a lot of friends in those years. We knew many people because of my father's school. Both my parents were religious, and early on we joined Transfiguration Parish in East Buffalo, says Sister Renee. I went to the parish school and later to St. John Canty Parish School, which is when I came into contact with the Felician Sisters. They taught at both schools. End quote. By grade school and junior high, she was helping the sisters with various chores, including cleaning the chapel. Sister Renee remembers noticing at recess that the sisters would gather in groups to share news, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. It made an impression. Isabel went on to attend the local Felician-run Villa Maria High School. By her senior year, she met a boy, and they started talking about marriage. Quote, "We both agreed let's finish college first," remembers Sister Renee. But the summer after high school graduation, my mother took me on a 2-month trip to Poland to learn about my mother country and to meet my extended family. That was quite an experience for me, especially meeting my grandfather with his handlebar mustache. On returning from Poland, Isabel heard that 2 of her friends had decided to become Felician sisters. It was soon after this news that Isabel heard something else, God's voice speaking to her. Quote, "The telling thing for me was what I heard in my head wasn't, 'I belong there with the Felicians.' Rather, it was, 'You belong there.' It wasn't me saying it, it was God saying it." End quote. Sister Renee began teaching in grade schools, Buffalo, Lackawanna, Batavia, and Salamanca, but always felt drawn to counseling. By 1988, she was ready to pursue her long-sought vocational calling as a counselor caseworker and was hired by Catholic Charities. During the 24 years with Catholic Charities, Sister Renee found her sweet spot as a Felician sister, ministering to immigrants and refugees in Buffalo. "I believe I have done important work in my service to God and God's people before and after that time, but during those years is when I felt most useful to Him," says Sister Renee. "The people I worked with really needed me, and in very real ways, I needed them." End quote. Let's take our last break. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Am-Pol Eagle on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. Well, Sister Renee is just a little bit older than I am, but quite a story. And of course, now I'm wondering if she knew my aunt back in the day. Sister Augustine has died many, many years ago at a somewhat young age. So we may never know, but that's okay. It's all about memories. Let's go to science in Poland, because we always learn new things there. There is what I believe to be a CAT scan. I'm not a doctor, don't quote me. This source is the Institute of Physical Chemistry, and it's a CAT scan of a brain. So, dormant brain cells help repair blood vessels after a stroke, the study finds. After a stroke, the brain activates its own repair system that helps stabilize damaged blood vessels, according to a new study co-authored by Marcin Tabaka, PhD, from the International Center for Translational Eye Research at the Institute of Physical Chemistry of the Polish Academy of Sciences. The research suggests that a small population of previously dormant cells begins migrating from the meninges toward injured areas of the cerebral cortex, where they help reinforce blood vessels and support recovery of the blood-brain barrier. The findings were published in the journal Cell Reports. Stroke is a major global health problem. According to the World Health Organization, nearly 12 million strokes occur worldwide each year. In Poland, around 90,000 cases are recorded annually, a figure expected to rise as populations age. Stroke remains one of the leading causes of death and long-term disability, often resulting in paralysis, speech impairment, and cognitive difficulties. While treatment often focuses on rapidly restoring blood flow, researchers note that this is only the first stage of injury. Many patients experience neurological deterioration days after successful intervention, a process linked to secondary damage in the brain's microcirculation and the breakdown of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a tightly regulated structure that normally protects the brains from toxins, immune cells, and unwanted substances in the bloodstream. After a stroke, however, it becomes disrupted, allowing inflammatory factors to enter brain tissue, increasing swelling and worsening damage. The new study focused on structures long considered passive, the arachnoid matter and pia matter, the inner layers of the meninges that surround the brain. Researchers found that these tissues may play an active role in post-stroke repair. A small population of cells originating from the neural crest, an embryonic structure that gives rise to a wide range of tissues, was identified in the pia matter. These cells were previously thought to disappear or lose their function after development. The study shows that after an ischemic stroke, these cells can become reactivated and migrate toward injured brain regions. Once there, they accumulate near blood vessels and help stabilize them, supporting the restoration of the blood-brain barrier. In animal models, this process reduced vascular leakage and improved neurological outcomes. Quote, "It is particularly interesting that the brain draws on very old developmental mechanisms to cope with acute injury. It is not about regeneration, but about stabilization, and this stabilization may determine how a patient functions after a stroke," said Marcin Tabaka, PhD. Researchers also identified a chemical signaling pathway that guides the cells to damaged areas. Signals released by injured blood vessel cells act as a beacon, directing the repair cells to sites where the barrier is compromised. When this signal was blocked in experiments, fewer repair cells reached the injury site. The barrier remained more permeable, and animals performed worse in neurological tests. The study also highlighted the role of pleiotrophin, or PTN, a protein produced by these cells that supports blood vessel stability and improves endothelial cell survival after oxygen deprivation. In laboratory and animal models, PTN was linked to reduced damage to the blood-brain barrier. The research team contributed bioinformatics analysis using single-nucleus RNA sequencing data to map cellular activity during the repair process. Researchers caution that the findings are preclinical and not yet applicable to patient treatment. However, they say the work changes how stroke recovery is understood, shifting attention from restoring blood flow alone to the brain's own delayed repair mechanisms. Quote, "If we learn to understand and support these endogenous repair mechanisms, we may be able to improve patient outcomes, even when the window for conventional treatment has already closed," Tabaka said. And this is from PAP, Science in Poland, and you can find more information at their website, www.scienceinpoland.pl. I just think that is fascinating, even if I don't understand all of it. It is just amazing research, and people have dedicated their entire lives to science so that human life can live better and longer, And while I'm thinking about it, because I did think about it during the reading of this article, if you smoke, please stop. If you know someone who smokes, talk to them about stopping. You can call Roswell Park. You can call the American Cancer Society to get help with quitting smoking. It takes time. It takes many tries. People have done it, and they're glad they do. Okay. I'm going to jump to Polkas on Tap and squeak a couple in here. Sunday, July 19th. Polka Boosters annual summer picnic at Clocks Grove, 1245 Seneca Creek Road in West Seneca, New York, 2 to 7 p.m. 7 is the polka band. This is a pre-sale only, so get your tickets ahead of time. I've got the contact information. It says specifically tickets are not sold at the door. So here's the phone number for tickets and more information. You're going to call Chris, 716-771-1076. Again, 716-771-1076. And I've never done triplicate, but I think I'm going to do for this one because you can't get in at the door. 716-771-1076. On Tuesday, August 18th, at the Erie County Fair in Slade Park from 1 to 4 p.m., the New Direction Polka Band will play. So you can sit on one of the benches there. You can sit in the audience. You can tap your toes. You can do a little polka and enjoy the music of New Direction Polka Band. On Saturday, August 29th, the Infant of Prague Summerfest, 921 Cleveland Drive in Cheektowaga, New York, from 2 to 5 p.m. Again, the New Direction Polka Band will play for your listening and dancing pleasure. Let's wrap it up. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Am-Pol Eagle. We read from the Am-Pol Eagle every Saturday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Joanne Yanitsky. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the Island Dispatch. Following that, at 5 o'clock is the Lockport Union Southern Journal. And at 6 o'clock, we have the Jamestown Post Journal. Stay with us for these readings and more. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.